Seems fair to me.
Yes, he did.
Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it look
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Hey, go see Hamilton. It is fantastic. If you have already seen it, go back. I enjoyed it that much on Easter night, and I do have to have one selfish note here. It's been 43 years ago today. Alvin Reid became an A5A. So shout out to my fraternity brothers out there, and shout out to all of you joining us tonight for Donnybrook. We've got some special guests in the house, and we're going to start with Jason Rosenbaum from St. Louis Public Radio.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Wendy Wiese from KTRS. Ray Hartmann from Raw Story and KTRS. He'll be on tonight. And Christine Byers from 5 on Your Side, Channel 5. Thank you for joining us today. Well, Wendy, Mayor Jones, 1 year, I guess today, as a matter of fact. And she had her State of the City address, first one, on Tuesday night. And what did you think of it, and where are we headed, and just your impressions of what she wants to get done, including $150 million going toward North City and some raises and some other things. So what do you think?
Well, I think that it is going to continue to be like the first year. We hear Mayor Jones, her plans, and then we hear Lewis Reed take her to task for those plans. And I think he's obviously well within the wheelhouse and in asking for specifics, because $150 million, that's an enormous amount of money. And it is I believe, isn't it the tail end of the American Rescue
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Plan? And those funds. But what I found really interesting was the 3 pillars, essentially. She didn't get into the specifics, as I said, but she's talking about redevelopment and changing the way we approach redevelopment or development, neighborhood transformation, economic empowerment. And while, those are very laudable, she is going to have to get into the details if she's going to win people over. And the only part of the story that I read on your website, Jason, was that really kind of amused me was when she touted the social workers and their activities with the 911 call system. And I thought how nice it would be if the 911, the emergency call center, worked that way for everybody. But you have more information about the raises for the police officers.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I found interesting was the response from the Ethical Society of Police, which represents primarily black officers. And they came out with a pretty strong statement criticizing her and saying, this proposed raise that she's giving police officers just isn't enough. With their health care costs going up and things like that, and the raise that she's proposing for them still doesn't put them anywhere near what their counterparts in St. Louis County are making. Right. And so they came out pretty strong, strongly critical of her.
I wouldn't say that I would be shocked that a lot of this money is going to North St. Louis City, because when it was announced that St. Louis was getting like over $500 million, the first thing that came to my mind is that money could do a lot of good toward transforming North St. Louis into something a lot better. I think that it remains to be seen whether the mayor is able to avoid what happened in the first year, where she and President of the Board of Aldermen, Lewis Reed, get into like very heated disagreements over how that money should be doled out. I don't think disagreement is necessarily a bad thing, because maybe he has a better idea of where that money should go. But I expect this to be a first salvo in a long process.
I think the disagreement is great. I mean, I think a lot of people have always looked, I know, over the years there's been a racial prism. There was always a 2-party system, white Democrats and black Democrats. Now we have something I didn't think I'd ever see, which is all 3 members of the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, which essentially is in a weak mayor system, and that's not aimed at Cheshire, that's what it's called, a weak mayor system, E&A functions like a mayor does in many other cities. And it's the fact that we have 3, I think, very qualified African Americans running in E&A removes some of what would have been a racial element. So I think, for example, and when you mentioned the Ethical Society, it doesn't surprise me at all. I'm sympathetic to them, but I think Tishare's had a good first year representing the city and setting a nice tone. But like on the $150 million for North City, just saying it isn't going to do anything until you know what it is. And so there's really, I mean, that's just a number. And so we'll have to see. It'll be interesting to see her relationship also with the business community, which has been much less contentious than I would have expected.
Yeah, because she wasn't part of the old political faction which merged together business leaders and trade unions, which was what brought Frances Slay to power.
She was much more critical of them as treasurer.
But this, I mean, the stakes are very, very high right now. I think in a post-pandemic city, I just wonder how much time she's going to have to get into those details.
And of course, there's been a lot of discussions, a lot of promises by her administration already in that first year that we have seen not quite come to fruition.
Right.
I mean, the second year is more important. Like, for example, they talked about getting a new police chief. They've got to get a new police chief. I mean, there's a lot. And in fairness, it is a hard job. I mean, the city of St. Louis is not exactly, you know, the easiest thing to govern. And I mean, it's a huge, you know, it's a very physically, you know, it's 300,000 people crammed into where there used to be 800,000, okay? It's got a lot of structural issues, a lot of long-term issues that are way beyond any mayor's control. So I think it's, I do think like I say, I think she's off to a decent start, but second year is going to be a lot more telling, I think.
Well, if I were mayor, the one thing I would applaud is 14 alder people are going to disappear here in a few years, and I think that would probably make the job a little bit easier. Now, there will still be Board of E&A, like you said, but yeah.
And I think, I have to say, I've been more impressed with Louis Reid this year than I have in the past, particularly the way they got through, I was astonished how well they got through
the redistricting. If there was a redistricting Hall of Fame, Louis Reid may be an inductee, because this is the second time that it's been basically unanimous.
I was shocked, and we'll see.
All right. I will end on this subject on this. I think that some of the debate as to where this $150 million is political, not economical. I think that I don't know that Louis Reid wants to run for mayor again, but I think there's some politics.
That may be an understatement.
Okay, speaking of which, politics, economics, the St. Louis County Council has approved a plan that will fund the Northside Rec Center, and then as a result, the stalemate involving the convention center. Now, no one knows what either complex is going to look like, but Jason, good thing, bad thing,
I think
middle of the road thing?
I think it's a middle of the road thing. I spent a lot of time talking with Kitty Ratcliffe, who is in charge of the agency that oversees the convention center. And I've walked through the convention center many times where she's pointed out the deficiencies of the convention center compared to other comparable cities. So I think that when you make a decision that you're going to make a publicly funded convention center, like in the 70s, as Ray was telling me earlier, before I was born, as Joe Manis would say, you know, eventually you're going to have to spend a lot of money to renovate it. So I know that there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I don't want to spend tens of millions of dollars on this thing, on this thing that doesn't seem very useful to me. But that was a consequence of a long-term decision. Now, I read that the cost is going to be more than expected, and I think that that could be attributable to the fact that construction costs everywhere are really high. And I think that the next step is going to be either do you scale down the project to make sure you fill that gap, or do you find money somewhere else? We'll see about that. As far as the recreation center, I think that that was an example of a time-honored tradition in legislative politics of somebody who controls a legislative body or who's an influential person like Rita Days, who's the county council chairwoman, using leverage to get something that she thinks is important to the first district. And as you mentioned, I think some of the details are still remain to be seen on that.
Well, that leverage may have rose the price tag on the convention center. So to me, that doesn't seem like a fair trade-off.
Well, there is also the fact that there's last time I checked, a county executive who could have been more forceful about doing something about it. It's like her leverage was because Sam Page, for whatever reasons, and my understanding is he generally supports the convention center, but he clearly wasn't willing, for whatever his reasons were, to be receptive to the $40 million rec center, which people should remember is a big priority of the University of Missouri at St. Louis.
Which, by the way, I am an employee of UMSL by virtue of being part of St. Louis Public Radio, but continue.
But you get free membership or what?
But I will say
I go to
this,
the Y in Brentwood.
it is a good thing that UMSL wants to do. Can we still call it UMSL? That it was a good thing that it's doing. It ran it through the Board of Curators. We talk about North County. It's right on Highway 70. It is a great idea for tourism. And the fact that the details haven't been developed don't take away from the fact.
Tourism?
Yes, tourism, and yes, it will. The idea of the rec center, part of it, is to have a state-of-the-art track facility that will draw track and field.
Events.
Well,
Okay.
that's tourism. It's tourism in the form of people coming to our city for track and field events. It's from something. It happens to be the kind of
Excuse me,
practical.
I thought you were inferring that people would come from out of town to use the rec center.
Well, they
That was
will as part of in the track and field facilities.
Okay.
And so I think it makes sense. To your point about the convention center, I mean, it was before you were born. It was state-of-the-art in '77. I'm old enough to remember in 1992, I think it was, when they came to sell the football stadium as an extension because, and it was state-of-the-art in '77. By '92, it was considered
Ancient.
obsolete.
It was ancient
And
ruins.
I wish I had the tape, and maybe it's in Donnybrook, where I said, I wonder what you're going to come back and say in 30 years.
Well,
and here we are 30 years
Weren't
later.
we talking about $800 million worth of improvements for the dome?
Yeah, well, the dome is complete.
750,
People
but
need to
who's
understand.
counting?
I think I'm glad you mentioned that. People need to understand this has nothing to do with the dome. It has zero. And the dome is going to be, whatever they're going to do for the dome or not do, is going to come out of the RSA process with the RAM settlement.
To piggyback on your point, though, Sam Page does not have a working majority on the St. Louis County Council. And because of that, he does, even if he wanted to do something, he needs either Rita Days or Shalonda Webb to go along with Lisa Clancy and Kelly Dunaway, who are or Ernie Trachis, who are their nominal, at least I was going to say nominal allies, but I would say allies on the board. So I think that has to be remembered when we were talking about Tashara Jones. Like, she has a very, I wouldn't even argue like it's a very strong majority on the Board of Aldermen. It's kind of a fragile one, but it's a lot less shaky than Sam Page.
But if Sam Page had wanted this done as a priority, this $40 million center, he had all the votes. He had certainly the four you just mentioned and possibly Tim Fitch. I mean, he certainly was for it at the end. Now, maybe Tim Fitch wouldn't be for anything that he was, but he had the votes to be for it. He wasn't with Rita on the project. And so to blame Rita alone for the delay, she was holding out. But Sam Page, had he been for that project, there wouldn't have been a delay.
But Steve, he could have pushed it. He could have done a lot of things.
He could have been for it.
But Rita Days could have said, like, okay, I'm going to vote for this now, and we're going to move it on down the line.
Why didn't he just
Why
support
would she
it?
squander that kind of capital? I mean, that's
Why
that
didn't he
was-
just support it?
Why would she squander the money that we're going to now have to additional pay for the convention?
She couldn't foresee that.
What? No, wait, no. Now, Ray, those stories go back to November, December of 2021 as to how much that was going to cost.
That's not her responsibility.
Okay, all right, I'm just saying that she was forewarned that this would cost money.
Why didn't Sam Page support this very good idea? That's my question. Why? I mean,
he didn't
didn't.
have the votes to pass it.
He did too. He had Rita and Shalonda
All right.
and
Speaking
Kelly.
of votes,
Plenty of votes.
Steve Roberts is, elected, no pun intended, to run against Cori Bush for her congressional seat. He had faced allegations of misconduct in the past, and this week he has come out and has defended himself on television stations, on print newspapers. And Christine, your thoughts, and I know you're working on this story as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my interview with Stephen Roberts will air tonight on 5 on Your Side at 10 o'clock. And it wasn't just allegations of misconduct. These were allegations of sexual assault. And they involved 2 separate women, 2 separate incidents. And so he decided this week to come out publicly for the first time, really, and address them head on. One of the accusers was Cora Faith Walker. She, as we know, suddenly passed away. The final autopsy for her cause of death is still pending. But following her death just weeks ago, he decided that he would release the terms of a confidential settlement agreement that they reached, in which she was forbidden from calling herself a survivor, and that there was a prepared statement within that settlement also that Mr. Stephen Roberts was able to release should she break this agreement, that would say, you know, to the effect of, I no longer believe that I was too intoxicated for consent, and some very damaging things for her. So he released that settlement agreement. That has prompted the second accuser to come forward as well and reveal the terms of her settlement agreement, which was actually for $100,000. Now, the settlement with Cora Faith Walker, there was no money involved. And he also said that he was taking steps to get this settlement agreement released before she died, because he said that she violated its terms by going on social media and calling herself a survivor and tweeting #MeToo and things like that, which were all forbidden by this agreement. So, you know, I went to our political analyst for some idea. Is this a good move, smart move on his part politically? Is this going to help him, harm him? And really, she believes it's going to actually harm him and do more harm for him rather than good.
Go ahead.
Well, I just to piggyback on that point, Steve Roberts' challenges, he's running against Cori Bush, who is going to have basically unlimited amounts of money and organizational power. And she's also going to have a lot of people in St. Louis that will walk across burning coals to make sure that she's reelected, because they agree with her either on policy or they really are drawn to her story, especially her Ferguson activism. And this race is really simple. It's whether Cori Bush can win the black vote in North City and North County. And she didn't do that in 2020. And I think that the reason why she's facing a challenge from Roberts is clearly banking on the possibility that that support either regresses or doesn't go up over a majority. So I'm not really sure that this really helps his cause of that, which is he needs to make sure that he wins the black vote of a majority black district against somebody who's going to have like a lot of money and be able to use things like this to move voters.
And when you're talking about the black vote, our political analysts pointed out that it's actually majority African-American women that turn out in the highest numbers in these type of elections. So she said, you know, he's really treading.
Did somebody corroborate that intention to release the terms of the agreement before Cora Faith Walker's death?
Yes, his campaign produced documentation showing, you know, he was filing motions with the court, filings with the court, accusing her of breaching this agreement and trying to seek some remedy here.
And even though it's common for people who still maintain their innocence to settle, perception is going to be reality here,
absolutely.
and I'm afraid you're probably right. This is not going to help him.
And to the point of campaign money, to your point here, his campaign pointed out that, you know, he's only $40,000 behind her in cash-on-hand contributions.
I think this was always going to be an uphill battle for him. And knowing what we know, I mean, what we knew ahead of time, I was surprised he got into the race, because it was just, there's nothing surprising about these being issues.
In fact, some of his denials were some of the same arguments he was making in 2016 when the Cora Faith Walker story came out.
So I think it was, I agree with you that it's not a very good strategy to engage this. I think the best thing would have been simply to, you know, it's out there. The allegations are there. People can make their decisions, talk about it as little as possible. And I think fighting back, while he has a right to do it, is not a very good strategy politically. And I don't think that turns out. So I think it doesn't turn out well for him to engage this topic.
I could see, though, the desperation, because you can
yeah.
control the message on traditional media, but when you're into social media now, it cannot be controlled.
Cori Bush has become a national figure. I think the only chance that the moderate wing of the Democratic Party basically had to win, and I think it's pretty uphill at this point, is to argue that her views are too progressive. And I don't.
And that they're going to hurt us financially.
That's where it's got to be.
We've got another politician with a somewhat troubling past, Eric Greitens, and he's running for the nomination in the Republican Party in the U.S. Senate, and he vows he is not dropping out. Jason, does he have any chance to actually win?
Oh, absolutely he has a chance to win. And anybody...
Didn't I explain this to you before on this show?
And look, he is making a calculated decision by the type of campaign that he's running, of appealing to like the Steve Bannon wing of the Republican Party, the populist wing. John Lamping and I were talking this week, the nationalist populist wing, that message is going to be enough to win a plurality in a 21-person Republican primary. So it is up to people like Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler, Attorney General Eric Schmidt, Congressman Billy Long, Senate President Pro Tem Dave Schatz, who has $2 million at his disposal, to make the argument that Greitens is not fit to be a U.S. Senator. And if they can't do that with all of the things that have come out, not only recently with Sheena Greitens' affidavit that she did under oath, but also the 2018 situation where KS also was under oath multiple times. I think there's certainly like things that are exploitable, but I think if you get complacent and say, oh, he can't win, it gives the opportunity for him to win a small plurality.
Which is exactly what we said about Donald Trump.
Exactly.
45th president.
Exactly. And I'm also surprised that his feelings about Ukraine haven't been explored more.
Well, but we're talking about the Republican primary. This is all red. It's just red meat. This is today's Republican Party. And so the people, there's among the base, there are two groups of people. One, the large one, that will never hear, believe this, they're not watching us tonight. They will not hear about these allegations at all in their cycle, in their silos. And then the other half is the ones that don't care about it. And so the idea, he might have lost a little bit of a few points. I don't think there's any doubting that. But in a way, what could be a 5 or 6 way race, I don't see, they've only got, I think it's 4 weeks to take their names off the ballot. No one is showing any indication of doing that.
It's not going to happen because Vicky Hartzler and Eric Schmidt believe that Eric Greitens is going to drop to 3rd and one of them has a chance. And as long as they feel that way, there's no reason for either one of them to drop out.
And this scandal, the latest scandal with Sheena Greitens, just gave them more hope that they could be the one. And so the idea that they're still all waiting for Trump to endorse somebody is, and I have to say, I think that you're right, and I've been saying it on the air, you got to look at this in terms of Republican primary, and the Democrats have got to be hoping that Eric Greitens gets the nomination. It would be interesting to see whether there'll be any effort by the Democrats to cross over and help him, a la Todd Akin, because he is clearly the most, gives them their best chance.
But what happens if they do that and he wins the general election?
It's just a vote in the Senate. They're all going to vote wrong from the perspective of normal people in the Senate. But the point is that they're not, it's just a vote in the Senate.
Yeah, the Democrats right now in Missouri have not proven to me that they have the ability to win a statewide election.
Sure they do. I mean, Jason Kander came very close.
But came very close doesn't make, thank you.
No, but he wanted to run against Eric Greitens.
They would have to piece together an urban, suburban, and rural coalition. If they're getting 20% in rural areas right now, which they have been for the last election cycles, they cannot win statewide elections.
I
think, hopefully, some people would say, I just cannot vote for this person. And they don't have to vote Democratic. They just have to just not leave it blank. Okay, in the last few minutes here, Ray, there was unfortunately another shooting and death on a Metrolink car. We don't have turnstiles. To me, it doesn't seem like a lot has changed. What are we going to do? Are turnstiles the answer? Are more police on the...
Well, let's look at this particular case. And obviously, Metrolink has great perception problems on security and real problems. But I would say that this one happening on the morning of Easter Sunday, okay, literally no one else on the train. It's another tragic statistic in the city of St. Louis of a murder. And people can, the idea that at midnight, somehow turnstiles would have kept these two guys off the train or kept them from arguing to the point where one of them shot the other one in the head, it's just, it's like Blazing Saddles and the toll booth in the desert. I mean, it's just, that's not, it's not going,
if the two of them were having an altercation on a parking lot, that's one thing. You're talking about mass transit, even on Easter morning. morning, even if they were the only two people on the train.
And a turnstile would have kept them off the train? Are you kidding?
It could have.
If you didn't have the money to
Are
get
you
on.
kidding? What? There was who's
So,
gonna keep
no,
up?
wait. No, let's just take it to its. All right. I lived in D.C. We had Metro. Okay. All right. Now, if I don't have the money, don't have a card, I can't
He's not
get
getting
on
on
the
the train.
train.
You jump
So
over
thus
the
the murder
turnstile.
doesn't happen on the train.
So it happens on the platform. What
So
difference
we're
does it make?
assuming that these people didn't pay.
We don't even know that they didn't pay.
My guess is they didn't.
Well, but
It's
excuse
scam.
me. Do you think hopping over a turnstile at midnight on
I don't think
Easter
you're hopping over
would be that-
turnstiles with murder on your mind. I really don't.
No, that's not the point. That whatever argument caused one of them to apparently murder the other, we don't know the detail, it could have happened on the platform. We'd be having the same thing about Metro. It's got nothing to do with Metrolink's management. I think they've tried.
Management. I'm just
no, I'm
saying
talking about, but that goes, and they are putting in the turnstiles. I don't think the turnstiles are going to make any difference, personally. But I certainly don't think they have anything to do with this tragedy on the train. This could have happened anywhere.
It could have happened anywhere, but it happened
didn't.
on the train.
But
So
it
what?
didn't.
But it had nothing to do with Are you seriously saying?
You
First
don't
of all,
know that.
Are you seriously saying it's because of turnstiles? So the guys would have been
It could
shaking
easily-
hands and hugging?
could
No.
have helped.
It could have done
stop
something to
this
stop it.
Killing.
You mean these guys wouldn't have killed each other and had an
On
argument
the
if they were
train.
On the train.
So what difference does it make if these guys killed each other in,
All
the, in the
right.
parking
Okay,
lot?
we got to go. Thank you, guys.
God.
All right. We don't have any letters this evening, but you can send one to Donnybrook, care of 9 PBS, 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. You can send an email to donnybrook@9pbs.org or a tweet to #DonnybrookSTL. And you can check us out on your favorite podcast outlet. Christine Byers, thank you.
Thank
Jason
you.
Rosenbaum, thank you. We look forward to having you back on the show again because you are much more knowledgeable than we are.
There you go.
All right, next up, our guest with Ray and Wendy will be Sam Fiorello, President and CEO of Cortex Innovative Community. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week on Donnybrook.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9 PBS.